Genesis chapter 1. Genesis chapter 1. Last week we started a new series that's going to go on just for the next few weeks. And it's on just the first few chapters of the Bible in the book of Genesis. And I call this series In the Beginning. And we're doing this series because, it's at the beginning that you find out most of the information that you really need in order to live life. And that's true of any story, like we talked about last week. It's a book, it's a movie, it's a show. You come in the middle, and you don't really know what's going on. Why are these people doing what they're doing? Why are they running away from each other? Why are they shooting each other? It's because everything was introduced at the beginning. The main characters, the main themes, the main problem that's being resolved in the rest of the movie or the book or the show or whatever it is, it all gets revealed at the beginning. And that's also true of the story of the world. You miss the beginning, and you basically miss everything. And that's why most people have questions about the most fundamental aspects of life. Who am I? Where did I come from? Why am I here? What am I supposed to do? Right? Well, all those answers are given if you know the beginning of the story. You miss the beginning, you basically miss everything. And thank God that in His Word, in the Bible, He starts at the beginning. Right? Somebody said that the best thing about the Bible is that it begins at the beginning and it ends at the end. God has given us the whole story right from the beginning, everything that we need to know in order to live a meaningful life and to answer all these fundamental questions that all of us have. So important to know, to really know these especially these first few chapters of the Bible, of the book of Genesis. And so that's why we're spending some time in these next few weeks really digging into the first few chapters of Genesis. And last week, we just looked at the very first verse in the Bible, Genesis chapter 1, verse 1. Immediately, even in the first 4 words of the Bible, we get introduced to the main character, the main hero, the main player of the Bible, of the world, of history. And who is that? It's God. In the beginning, God. In the beginning, before anything else was, even before time, at least as we know it, began, there was God. And so immediately we're introduced to this single one God, self-existing. No one caused God. God exists by Himself. God is self-sufficient, as we talked about last week. He doesn't need anything or anyone else. Everything that He needs, He finds in Himself. He's eternal. Just from the first few words of the Bible, we find out all these things about God. In the beginning, God. And we also find out that God does something. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And so apparently, God, at some point, decides to go public. And He wants to display His glory. He wants to communicate His joy to another being. He wants them to experience His love that He has in Himself. And so He creates the heavens and the earth. And this morning, we're going to go into the creation now. Okay? This is what we're talking about this morning. We're talking about creation, how it happened, and what it is, the fundamental nature of creation. Okay? And so let me read, again, starting in Genesis chapter 1, and we'll start in verse 1, and we'll just read the creation story together. Okay? So, it says, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now the earth was formless and empty. Darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. And God said, 'Let there be light,' and there was light. God saw that the light was good, and He separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness He called night. And there was evening, and there was morning, the first day. And God said, 'Let there be a vault between the waters to separate water from water.' So God made the vault and separated the water under the vault from the water above it, and it was so. God called the vault sky, and there was evening and there was morning the second day. And God said, "Let the water under the sky be gathered to one place, and let dry ground appear." And it was so. God called the dry ground land, and the gathered waters he called seas. And God saw that it was good. Then God said, "Let the land produce vegetation, seed-bearing plants and trees on the land that bear fruit with seed in it, according to their various kinds." And it was so. The land produced vegetation, plants bearing seed according to their kinds, and trees bearing fruit with seed in it according to their kinds. And God saw that it was good. And there was evening and there was morning the third day. And God said, "Let there be lights in the vault of the sky to separate the day from the night, and let them serve as signs to mark sacred times, days, and years. Let them be lights in the vault of the sky to give light on the earth." And it was so. God made two great lights, the greater light to govern the day, the lesser light to govern the night. He also made the stars. God set them in the vault of the sky to give light on the earth, to govern the day and the night, and to separate light from darkness. And God saw that it was good. And there was evening and there was morning the fourth day. And God said, "Let the water teem with living creatures, and let the birds fly above the earth across the vault of the sky." So God created the great creatures of the sea, and every living thing with which the water teems and that moves about in it, according to their kinds, and every winged bird according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. God blessed them and said, "Be fruitful, increase in number, fill the water in the seas, let the birds increase on the earth." And there was evening, there was morning, the fifth day. And God said, "Let the land produce living creatures according to their kinds, the livestock, the creatures that move along the ground, and the wild animals, each according to its kind." And it was so. God made the wild animals according to their kinds, the livestock according to their kinds, and all the creatures that move along the ground according to their kinds. And God saw that it was good. So let's stop there. We'll actually finish the chapter next week with the creation of human beings. But again, this morning we're talking about creation. And right away, again, we find out what creation, when I talk about creation, I'm talking about everything that has been made, okay? The world, the physical world, the universe, people, everything in it, okay? 4 things mainly that we want to learn about creation this morning and how it happened. First of all, same thing we talked about last week, right? You can't escape it. Creation is all about God. Again and again and again, God, God, God. God said, God saw, God declared. Right? It's all about God. And it's very clear that the author of Genesis, most likely Moses, is emphasizing that fact. God is a focal point of everything. Everything has come from God, and everything is coming back to God and pointing towards God. In fact, Psalm 19 says this: "The heavens declare the glory of God, the skies proclaim the work of his hands. Day after day they pour forth speech. Night after night they reveal knowledge. They have no speech. They use no words. No sound is heard from them. Yet their voice goes out into all the earth, their words to the ends of the world." Those are amazing verses, actually. Right? It's saying all of creation, without any sound as such or any words as such, they're making this huge noise, and in fact blasting to the world, to the ends of the earth, to everybody who's got eyes and who's got ears. There's a God, and he's great, and he's amazing. Right? Romans chapter 1 says his divine nature, his eternal power is clearly seen, being understood from what has been made. Right? We see the glory of God, the vastness of outer space, the power of the thunderstorms, the beauty, the delicacy of the most simple little flower that's just growing wildly in the fields. I mean, in intricacy, the complexity of a single cell. God is seen. All of creation is crying out that there's a maker, that there's a God, and even giving an idea of what this God is actually like. He's glorious, he's beautiful, he's creative. I've said some of these things before, but it's amazing when you think about creation. I love to think about these things. There's 20,000 species of ants in the world. Can you believe that? Little ants. 20,000 species. And we're told that in the head of a centipede, you know a centipede? Maybe an inch long or half an inch long. There's 228 muscles in the head of a centipede. We talked about this last week, right? The sun this morning. Every Sunday morning I go up to the roof of my house and I go over my sermon and just spend time with God. And it's always, the sun always is rising when I'm up there. And just to think of the sun way out there, 150 million kilometers. It's so hot, feeling on my body. 150 million kilometers away. You could fill 1 million Earths inside the sun. So big is the sun. And yet the sun is just an average star in the universe, of which there's trillions of stars, trillions of light years away from one another. Just can't even fathom. Right? I love to think about, and I know I've shown pictures in the past of these fish that live in the bottom of the ocean that have electrical light bulbs, sticking out of their heads like lampstands. Right? They don't need a torch. They don't need a cell phone. At the bottom of the ocean, it's pitch black, right? And they've got their little lights, right? Their little nightlight type of things, right? Just swimming along. Thousands of years, nobody even knew that these fish existed. And yet God created them. And why would he do that? Right? I think it's just because this is the way God is. I really believe God just loves this stuff. I'm going to create fish at the bottom of the ocean. Nobody's going to see them. Nobody's even going to know about them for thousands of years. I'm going to create stars trillions of light years away that no eye is even going to lay an eye on them. Right? I'm just going to do it because I love it. So, one question for us, even at this point, is are our eyes open to see the wonder of God, the beauty of God, the creativity of God, the power of God, the intelligence of God, right? Even in a dusty, dirty, polluted, crowded, overcrowded city like Gurgaon, right? You just can't hide the glory. It's there everywhere if we just have eyes to see it. Right? It's all pointing to God, to Maker. It's the first thing that the Bible wants to tell us about this world that we live in. It's all about God. It's screaming, hey, listen, are you watching? Are you looking? Are you listening? It's all about God. Okay, so now we get into it. If you look at verse 2, by the way, verse 1 is really like a banner, right? Across Genesis chapter 1, across the book of Genesis, and really across the whole Bible. Right? In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Right? This is all God's. It's all about him. He owns it. Right? And then, starting in verse 2, it gets into how this actually happened. Look at verse 2. It says, "Now the earth was formless and empty. Darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters." Now, apparently, God creates, maybe you could call the raw materials. He just makes it out of nothing, and it's just there. And it says here at the beginning of verse 2 that it was formless and empty. And, in the original Hebrew, which the Old Testament was mainly written in, it's actually rhyming words. These words, formless and empty, in my Bible and in the English. In the Hebrew, it's tohu wabohu. Tohu wabohu. Okay? And the idea is that there's darkness, there's water. Right? What's going on here? Well, in the ancient world, the sea and darkness, they represented chaos, disorder, danger, even death, violence, everything that's bad. And initially, this is the way the world is. Okay? It's formless, it's empty, it's dark, there's water. Okay? But there's hope at the same time. At the end of verse 2, it says, the Spirit of God is hovering. And the idea is something like a bird, like a seagull, kind of floating or just making its way across the waters. And it's very interesting also. Bible scholars actually kind of debate, so this word that's translated Spirit of God, should it be translated Spirit or should it be translated breath? Because in Hebrew, it's actually the same word. And maybe the author of Genesis meant it to be that way because the Spirit of God and the breath of God, which comes, from which comes the Word of God, these are all so closely linked together, right? There's darkness, there's chaos, but at the same time, there's hope. The Spirit of God, the breath of God is hovering, which actually leads us to the second thing that we find out here about Genesis 1. Creation is a result of God's speech. Okay, and I'm sure you saw this as I was reading it. Look at verse 3, and God said, let there be light, and there was light. In verse 6, and God said, let there be a vault between the waters to separate water from water. In verse 9, and God said, let the water under the sky be gathered to one place, and dry ground appeared. In verse 11, then God said, let the land produce vegetation. In verse 14, and God said, let there be lights in the vault of the sky. In verse 20, and God said, let the water teem with living creatures. In verse 24, and God said, let the land produce living creatures. In verse 26, and God said, let us make mankind in our image and in our likeness. Again and again and again, how does God create the world? He creates it amazingly by talking. And if you were here last week, I had mentioned some of these other creation stories that are there in other cultures and other religions. And the way of creation is so different. There's often gods and goddesses that are fighting. Right? And sometimes the creation is made out of the body of this dead god or dead goddess, or out of a flower, or out of some animal, or some rock, or some tusk, or whatever it might be. Right? In the Bible, where does creation come out of? It comes out of God's mouth. Right? He breathes words. He speaks, and out of nothing comes something. Right? Out of the emptiness and the darkness and the void comes life. Right? God speaks, and it happens. In fact, there's C.S. Lewis, who's a great British scholar, author, and so on. He wrote these series of books for children. You might have heard of it or read it or watched the movies. It's called The Chronicles of Narnia, and it's children's books, but it's actually very profound in the truths that he's communicating in such simple ways that even children can understand. But God in the Chronicles of Narnia is represented as a lion named Aslan. And in one of the stories, in one of the books, there's this the picture of creation as it happens. And how does it happen? Well, it's this lion, Aslan, big, powerful, mighty lion, and he starts singing. I could just, what a beautiful image. He starts singing. And as he starts singing, suddenly some green appears around his feet, and it moves out and becomes water, and it becomes land and grass, and he continues to sing, and these flowers and trees appear on some hillsides, and they kind of move out from him. And as the speed of the music gets faster, this big flurry of birds flies across the sky, and the butterflies start flitting, and what a beautiful picture, right? And I think it's a very accurate one in many ways, although it's of course imaginative. But God, He's singing, and life is coming into being. Things are happening out of nothing. Something is taking place out of disorder. Order is coming as God speaks. In fact, some Bible scholars have said that there's almost like the way that it's been written here, Genesis chapter 1, it's almost like a choir with a soloist. Right? God is the soloist, and He's singing, and then the choir, so to speak, is in the back, and it's kind of echoing. And God said, and so it was. Right? God said, let there be light, and there was light. And God said, let there be land, and there was land. It's like this kind of song and this kind of interchange, this kind of echo. God's speaking, and things are happening. Creation is a result of God's powerful speech, His powerful words. And, before we leave this point, I have to say this, that God's word that created the world is still powerful, isn't it? It doesn't just create, but it also recreates, even in our own day. Okay? In fact, let me just show you a couple of verses here. 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 4, it says, the God of this age has blinded the minds of unbelievers so that they cannot see the light of the gospel of the glory of Christ, who is the image of God. Minds of unbelievers blinded, they cannot see light. A couple of verses later, 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 6, it says, for God, who said, let light shine out of darkness, made His light shine in our hearts to give us the light of the knowledge of the glory of God in the face of Christ. Do you hear what's going on there? Right? The same God who said at the beginning, on the very first day of creation, let there be light, He still speaks, and the lights turn on inside our hearts so that we can see Jesus, so that we can be transformed, so that we can be saved. Right? How does this happen? It happens through God's word, His powerful word. And that's why in our church, by the way, we emphasize the word of God so much, right? Because God's word is powerful. Things happen as His word goes out. No wonder Paul said, Romans chapter 1, verse 16, I'm not ashamed of the gospel, the good news. Why? Because it is the power of God for salvation. Right? There's power in the word. Right? Same word that spoke the universe into existence, the same word that speaks even now when we read the Bible. Right? It creates faith, it creates salvation, it creates light, it creates life, it creates transformation. God's powerful word. So, creation is all about God. It's a result of God's speech, and now getting into it a little bit, we won't get into it too much. Third thing that I think we learn here in Genesis chapter 1 is that creation is ordered and systematic. It's ordered and it's systematic. I don't know if you've ever noticed or heard, there's a beautiful correspondence in how God actually creates over these 6 days, how God creates the universe. Okay, let me just show this to you. You can divide the 6 days into two sections or two halves of 3 days each. Okay? First 3 days, God forms. We'll see that in a moment. Second 3 days, God fills. Okay, this is how God creates the universe, how He creates the world. First 3 days He spends forming the space, and then He spends the next 3 days filling the space. Okay, so day 1, He creates light. Okay, God said, let there be light. And what is this light? We don't actually know. Because it's only on day 4 that He creates the sun and the moon and the stars. First day, he creates light, and actually, it shouldn't surprise us too much. In the end of the Bible, Revelation 21, there's so many parallels between the beginning and the end, and it says in Revelation 21, at the very end of the Bible, that there was no need for any sun. Why? Because the glory of God lit up the place, right? That's what it's going to be like in heaven, and so maybe it's a similar kind of thing. When God starts creating the universe, there's light. Right? But then in day 4, right, he creates the sun and the moon to shine on the earth specifically. Right? Similarly, day 2, he creates the sky, and he creates water. And then day 5, he fills that space up there and down there with birds and with fish. Okay. Day 3, he creates the land, he creates vegetation, plants, and day 3 he creates land and plants. Day 6 he creates animals and man to fill the land, right? To eat the plants. Okay? This beautiful correspondence between the 6 days of creation. First, God forms a space, and then in the second half of that week, the creation week, he fills the space. Now, let me just say a few words here about these days, because there's a lot of discussion and debate and so on about what are these days exactly. And of course, maybe the standard understanding of the days are the 24-hour days, as we know days. And those might be these days, but it's very interesting, again, when does the sun get created? It's on the 4th day, okay? So to understand days the way that we have them, 24 hours, you need a sun. Right? And so what are these days? Are they literal 24-hour days? Some people have said, and they call this a day-age view, that these might actually be, longer days. We don't know, right? I certainly don't know. I don't think anybody really knows, that these things are debated and so on and so forth. Even the 7th day, we'll come to this in a couple of weeks, but it looks like that's a period, and I won't give all that away. But, it doesn't look like it's that 7th day is, again, a 24-hour period. There seems to be more going on here. Okay, so there might be a day is really like an age, even of 1 billion years or more, or it might be a literal 24-hour period. Again, what's the answer to this? I don't know, right? And I don't think anybody really knows, and I don't think God has given us all of the information. Again, like I said last week, this is not meant to be a scientific textbook, right? Some people in the past have said that the Earth is 6,000 years old, and now, in science they say it's billions and billions, and it's getting longer and longer. Which is the right answer? I don't know. Right? That's a good answer. Right? We don't have to really worry about it, because it doesn't really matter how old the universe is. At least it doesn't matter to me. Okay, and it doesn't have to be a sticking point, right? For someone coming to faith, or someone who's studying these things, whatever their background might be. I think the main thing is creation is ordered, creation is systematic, and maybe, like I said last week, I can't remember if I said this or not, but creation has a beginning, right? The universe has a beginning, and science is also saying the same thing more and more. Right? There's a beginning point. This hasn't been around forever and ever, or endless cycles. Right? There's been a beginning point, and God has done it. Right? Through His Word, His powerful speech, and in this very ordered and systematic way, God, step by step, is doing it. It's not by random chance. Right? I don't believe in evolution, at least the way it's understood. Darwinian evolution, which is based on chance. Right? The creation story, at least as far as I can tell, there's no chance in anything. Right? It's God, step by step, through His action, through His words, right, who's making it happen. And of course, there's so much more to say about all of these things, and we won't get into all the science and blah, blah, blah. Right? I think the main things that we need to know, again, creation is all about God. God speaks, and it came into being. God creates in this very ordered and systematic way. And the last thing we need to see is that creation is good. It's good. Right? Did you notice that again and again and again? God creates, God looks, and God says in his heart, it's good. Right? Let me just show you this. Look at verse 10. It said, God called the dry ground land, and the gathered water he called seas, and God saw that it was good. In verse 12, the land produced vegetation, plants bearing seed according to their kinds, and trees bearing fruit with seed in it according to their kinds, and God saw it was good. In verse 18, or you can start in verse 17, God set them in the vault of the sky to give light on the earth, to govern the day and the night, to separate light from darkness, and God saw that it was good. Verse 21, so God created the great creatures of the sea and every living thing which the water teems and that moves about in it, according to its kinds, and every winged bird according to its kind, and God saw that it was good. And finally, verse 25, God made the wild animals according to their kinds, and the livestock according to their kinds, and all the creatures that move along the ground according to their kinds, and God saw that it was what? It was good. And next week, we talk about the crown of creation, human beings. The final thing that God creates, and God looks at the whole universe, the world that he's made, the people, to rule it, and he says it's not just good, but it's very good. Creation is good. All of it, it's good. God made it good. Right? And it might be corrupted in different ways because of the entry of sin, and we'll see that in the next few weeks, but at its basic nature, creation is good, and that's very, very important because we have a tendency, right, especially as kind of religious type of people, to say that spiritual things are good. Prayer, reading the Bible, fasting, actually staying away from that, those are the good things. To enjoy creation is not a good thing. That's lesser. And we see that division between, what people have called the sacred and the secular. Maybe you could call it the spiritual and the physical. Sunday morning and the rest of the week when you go to that bad office, right, we tend to make that division, and God doesn't allow that division. Right? God says all of it. It's the material, the immaterial, the eternal, the temporary, the physical, the spiritual, the sacred, the secular. It's all about God. Right? And God created it. It's good. And of course, in the world, people also have a tendency to say that this is good food, say, for example. This is bad food. This is a good day. This is a less good day. Right? Maybe this is auspicious. This is not auspicious. This is lucky. This is not lucky. This is blessed. This is normal. Right? Again, God doesn't allow that. I remember when I was living in Delhi, I used to have these long, very enjoyable conversations, for me at least, with the Kamwali who used to come to my house, and she observed every fast, every special day, everything that you could possibly imagine. She observed it all, and I love to just say, what's today, right? And, of course, for example, onions and garlic, no-nos on Friday. I said, why onions and garlic? Why not carrots and potatoes? Why not Mondays or Thursdays? And of course, she had no idea why garlic and onions, why Friday. But we all have a tendency to do that. God says, well, but it's good. It's all good. I've made it. And I've declared it good, and in fact, very good. In fact, let me just show you this passage. It's very interesting how seriously God takes creation and the goodness of creation. Okay, just look with me. 1 Timothy chapter 4. It says, the Spirit clearly says that in later times, some will abandon the faith and follow deceiving spirits and things taught by demons. Such teachings come through hypocritical liars whose consciences have been seared as with a hot iron. Okay, who is it talking about? It's talking about false teachers. Hypocritical liars. Following deceiving spirits. They're teaching things taught by demons. Consciences seared. Right? False teachers. These are, bad people, right? Well, what is their teaching? Well, Paul goes on, 1 Timothy. Now look at what their teaching is. They forbid people to marry and order them to abstain from certain foods. which God created to be received with thanksgiving by those who believe and who know the truth. For everything God created is good. And nothing is to be rejected if it's received with thanksgiving. These hypocritical liars whose consciences have been seared as with a hot iron, following deceiving spirits, teachings of demons. What is a teaching? That marriage is not good. Right? That this food or that food you should avoid. That's it. Can you imagine? Such a strong condemnation. People just say, maybe marriage is bad, maybe sex is bad. Right? It's not good. It's better if you stay away from those things. It's better if you avoid those certain foods. The Bible says very clearly, this is good. It's to be received, right, from a good God who loves us, who created it for us. In fact, when we go to heaven, we talked about this at the end of the journey through the New Testament. We were talking about Revelation, right? We talked a little bit about heaven, and it's a physical place. The Bible is very clear about that. It's not just some spiritual thing where you just kind of float around in the clouds, right? We're going to have physical bodies, resurrected physical bodies, but physical bodies, living in a physical place. And it's talking about feasting and food. It even talks about clothing. Creation is good. So, what does this mean for us today? Finally, I think just one thing that summarizes it, in my mind at least. Enjoy creation to the glory of God. What are we supposed to do? We are to enjoy creation to the glory of God. And I think the statement, at least as I've tried to frame it that way, it keeps us from two opposite mistakes again. Right? The one mistake is, again, that over-spiritual person says the only worthwhile thing to do is to pray and to read your Bible, maybe go to church, maybe fast. Right? Don't think about these things here on the earth. Just focus on whatever's up there. I don't think that's right, is it? Right? God has put us in a physical world, and it's a good world. And he's done it for us. And we'll see next week, he's told us to actually develop this world, to work in it, to make something out of it, and to enjoy it. And by the way, there's a reason why those over-spiritual type of people are such grumpy people most of the time. Why? Because they're not being like Jesus. Do you remember what Jesus' first miracle was? What was Jesus' first miracle? Turning water into wine. I think it's 144 liters of the best wine that anybody's ever tasted, so that a party could go on into the night? What? Jesus, you're supposed to be out there praying somewhere, right? First of all, you're at the party. And secondly, the wine is run out. You're supposed to be saying, oh, great, this is good. Now let's have some serious conversation. Jesus, God, when he comes down to the earth in the person of Jesus Christ, the wine is running out at the party, and it's an embarrassment, and it's kind of this disaster. And Jesus makes wine so that the party can keep going. Right? And it's all a picture of the future wedding feast that we're going to enjoy with Jesus as his bride. And we're going to feast with him forever. We enjoy creation, but the second part is equally important, right? To the glory of God. Right? We enjoy creation to the glory of God. And this is obviously, there's way less over-spiritual people. I wish there was more over-spiritual people, actually. most people, obviously, in the world, believers, unbelievers, we want to enjoy everything in creation, but there's not a thought about God or where this all came from. I just want to have as much as I can, as quickly as I can, right? Indulging in everything for my pleasure without a thought to the one who actually gave it to me. Right? And that's not only rude to take a gift and never to thank or to, appreciate the one who gave it, but just think about this, okay? That actually reduces our enjoyment of it, doesn't it? When we forget where this came from, who it came from, we actually reduce our own pleasure in it. This week I was at a wedding in Dehradun, and it's our friend Dinesh. Some of you know him. And I went to the reception on Thursday nights, and they were showing a video while, just over and over and over again at the reception. And the video was extremely well made, okay? I think they used drones and, all these different outfits. And it was quite an amazing kind of Hollywood, Bollywood kind of production on this video. But in one of the scenes of this video that was showing at the reception was him kind of, I'm sure it didn't happen this way, but, a very typical kind of proposal with a ring and everything. And he gives it to her, and he gets on his knee and this and that. And, she looks at the ring, and it's all acted, of course. But she smiles, and they hug, and, the typical kind of scene. But then I was thinking about it in relation to this. I'll just think about this. She looks at that ring. It's a beautiful ring. I think it even had diamonds on it and everything else. And I'm sure she loves that ring. It's precious. It's beautiful. It's expensive. But then, even more than the beauty of the ring itself, she thinks about where it came from, right? She thinks about this man who loves her and has committed himself to her for life. And that beautiful diamond ring, goes from being expensive to becoming priceless, right? And would she have been happy if he had just given her a plastic ring? Or one of these candy rings that my kids eat, all sticky? Right? I'm sure she would have been fine. Right? But it's the beauty of the gift mixed with the love, the care, the thoughtfulness. And if there's ever been a thoughtful guy, it's Dinesh, okay? If you know him. He used to be in our church. Right? The thoughtfulness of the ring, and from his heart on her finger, that becomes something, without price. And I was thinking it's the same thing with God and what he's given to us, isn't it? It's so good. And everything that God has created is good. And it's to be received with thanksgiving. And our enjoyment of it is only multiplied as we remember that it comes from our loving Father who has given it to us as a gift. And it comes from his heart because he loves us. Wow. Enjoy creation, not just for itself because there's some cool stuff out there, right? But to the glory of God, right? When your eyes are open and you see it, and you know where it came from, and you give thanks, and you do it as an act of worship, even as you enjoy it, right? This is what life is all about. This is what we're going to be doing for eternity. So last thing, just to make this very practical today, I would recommend that you go for lunch sometime later today. Go with your family, maybe some friends, maybe out, maybe at your home. Enjoy every bite. And look around the table. Right? It's not just da-da-da-da-da-da, and I've got this and I've got that and I've got to go here and there. Just stop and enjoy the moment, the family, the friends, the food, maybe the house or whatever. Right? Maybe later on, after lunch, a good activity. I know it's hot after lunch, but one is, first of all, just take a nap. That's also a good thing to do. Right? Just rest. If you don't have small kids. And maybe after the nap, you can take those small kids to the park. Or you yourself can go for a walk in the park. And maybe as you're on the way to the park, you could just ask God to open your eyes. Right? Again, like I said, even in the midst of the dust and the dirt and, parks that are kind of weird and not beautifully landscaped, the glory of God shines in the squirrels and the flowers and the trees and whatever little bits of grass that's there. Right? You look at the sun, if you can see it. Right? The clouds, the sky. Right? It's all screaming the glory of God. Or maybe afterwards you can go for coffee with a friend. Right? You can laugh. You can read a good book. Watch some good movie. Right? Not this trashy kind of movie, but some thought-provoking movie that actually makes you think and do it all for the glory of God. And, of course, if we're doing things for the glory of God, that means we're also not just selfish. Right? We're also thinking about others. Right? As we're eating, as we're with our family members, as we're thinking about them, maybe we've got an opportunity to bless someone with that same enjoyment who wouldn't have had that enjoyment otherwise. Right? We do all of this to the glory of God. He's worshipped. He's pleased. We're blessed. We're encouraged. We find joy. This is what it's all about.